Thank you for joining us, everyone. This is Politics Alive, reaching you from Alive Television. I am Olubenga George. No doubt, the most popular, the most important, the most talked about event in Nigeria at the moment is the 2023 elections, which is just 15 days away from here. Very interesting, yes, and how fast, the time takes, especially toward that election. And a lot of preparation have gone into this process as Nigeria will make its decision to choose the 7th leader in the Fourth Republic since the reintroduction of democracy in 1999. But of course, this process has come with its own challenges and of course, maybe a bit of development across sectors, which provided the basis for which the election process is to abide by. And of course, you do remember that was a struggle, especially when we go back to 2018 elections, where the 8th Assembly made efforts, to pass across to Nigerians a working document that could deliver to the Nigerian people a flawless election. Now, 2023 elections is just a few days away. We have these laws in waiting. We have all the efforts by the Independent National Electoral Commission, by the political parties, and other stakeholders, the police, the security agents across the country, have all made efforts to ensure that the 2023 election is a flawless exercise. However, can we really say that the 2023 elections is going to be a flawless exercise? Well, only 15 days we have to tell that. But more importantly, where we are concerned here is looking at Nigeria after the elections in February and March 11. What is going to happen to the country called Nigeria? Looking at the rate and the system of vociferous opposition, of the campaignings, of enemies inherited and friends made, along this process. What impact is it going to have on the nation, Nigeria, on its unity? A lot of wounds have been incurred, on during this process. How do we heal in this process? How do we unite the Nigerian state as one entity that is never divided, that is ready to face the future, that is ready to partake in the global development and contribute to global standards? Yes, this is our focus on today's edition of Politics Alive on Alive Television. When I return from this break, my guest, our policy analyst, will be joining me to look into this subject and especially how Nigeria can heal quickly from some of the wounds it has incurred in this electoral process. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Now, Tochukwu Ifemene joins me in the studio to talk about this subject. Of course, he is a policy analyst and a political analyst as well. So he's going to help us make sense of some of the events that has happened, especially since the campaigning season, pre-campaign season, where we are right now and where we will be going after elections in Nigeria. It's good to have you join me today.
Thank you, Mr. Gbenga, for having me.
Yes, like I like to do it, I like to go straight to the conversation. I believe that we are in a very, very, very serious moment in the country. Tensions are high, emotions are high, and everyone is looking at February 25, which is exactly 15 days from here. A lot of people are also looking at March 11 for those who are contesting in the state. But you will agree with me that more than ever before, we've had challenges, whenever we're about to have elections. And the 2023 challenge comes to the Nigerian people in an entirely different direction. So we have an election period where there is scarcity of the Naira note. I've never heard of it in history. This is the first time that we'll be having such serious issue. Nigerians cannot access their hard-earned money, because of the policy to swap the Naira for new Naira notes of 200, 500 and 1,000 Naira. A lot of people say this is ill-timed. A lot of people say this is a decision made at the very right time, as it will help to curb vote buying and all of that. But this is where I'd like to begin the conversation from. I'd like to get your views. We've had laws, we've had all sorts of things, in preparation for the 2023 general elections. But at the cruise of it, we have the new Naira note policy that has impacted and affected the Nigerian people. How do you think this is going to impact on the elections and the electioneering process in February 25th and March 11th in this country?
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Gbenga, once again for having me. The scarcity of the Naira, like we have come to experience in the nation for the last 2 weeks, and we are hearing 10th is just, I think, next tomorrow, the extension of the CBN has gone. There's a Supreme Court verdict. Jurisdiction is still subject to a lot of interpretation, because how will it be enforced? If the central bank was to go about it, how do you enforce it? How do you stop it? How do you deal with the people in the rural areas? How do people ensure that they get this kind of money? Over 3 trillion, if I'm right, has been withdrawn from the economy, and about only 300 billion have been pumped back. How does it go out? So what it shows that there's shortage of cash, physical cash. The online channels for transfers are not working. And straight to your question, we are hearing, I think there's a breaking news by this afternoon of, I think the University Commission allowing students to go. Between me and you, we know right now that to get 20,000 naira in Nigeria, 20,000 naira is a Herculean tax. That's 20,000 naira in cash.
Cash.
If you actually get that from a POS machine, you are likely to pay over maybe 3,000 or 4,000 naira just for getting
or 5.
Or 5.
Even.
So it will take a very, very patriotic Nigerian student to go and look for over maybe 25,000, 30,000 because he wants to go and cast his vote, okay, to travel from wherever he is because of what happened during the strike, and say, I want to go and cast my vote and come back afterwards. So the issue of the shortage of cash is going to be a big problem for the students who were even contemplating maybe they should, because they made an agitation that has been granted to them, but the next question is a move, right? All right, we come back to the political players. For me, I think I like that because the concept of vote buying, this would have been one election with the highest vote buying in the history of the world, not in the history of Africa.
Why do you say that?
Oh, we saw it in the primaries of the two leading parties, the People's Democratic Party and also the All Progressive Congress. We saw it on social media how some people took certain money, 12 million, 22 million, and were given to their wards. We saw EFCC being physically on ground. Okay? It's not something that is challenged. There was massive vote buying during the primaries of these two dominant stuff. And once again, we did not hear them complaining about any things that, like you've been hearing a lot of people saying in Nigeria, you didn't complain about the ASU strike, you didn't complain about the kidnapping, you didn't complain about the fuel, like you are not complaining about money. What is this thing about money that the complaint is so painful to the politicians? We know that the Nigerians are suffering it, okay? Analysts have said that it's a policy that has been rushed. It was not well thought out. So there's going to be a concern on how cash is going to move. 2 days ago, if you remember, the INEC president was, the INEC commissioner was with the governor of CBN, and he was asking that for the sake of logistics, we need cash. And the governor said, we're going to supply to you anything we're going to supply to you. So the cash shortage is already putting pressures on Nigeria. So if I really want to answer your question in context of what Nigerians experience on a daily basis, I would say for the fact that Nigerians in the last 3 months, almost everywhere around the country, have been buying fuel for over 400 naira in some parts in the south of the southeast of the middle belt. Okay, here in Abuja where we stay, or in Lagos, you know that the fuel queues are high. So there's fuel queues. There are people who are now crying for this issue of getting cash, and there's a high level of inflation going on and nobody's talking about it. In the midst of everything that has been happening, if you notice in the last 1 week, 2 weeks, the question of insecurity based on kidnapping went down, but you had some kind of crisis that has been happening in certain quarters. So already the polity is already heated. The polity is already charged. The average Nigerian is already feeling the heat. What I would rather say and ask is that how will it affect the election? Some of us feel that it's actually going to affect the ruling party, because the average Nigerian feels that this malaise that they are facing, this scourge that they are feeling right now in Nigeria, is actually caused by the ruling party. Some of us would have been feeling that this would have been the best time for the ruling party would have made things a bit relaxed so that people will vote. The only problem is that the current oppositions, especially when people with the Democratic Party, have not been putting a lot of fire for the current party.
It's interesting that you come from there, because when you talk about that issue now, I think there are different sides to it. So you talk about the ruling party and you see the conspiracy theory that has been presented, put forward by some members of the ruling party. You talk about the presidential candidate of the party. He has alleged that certain elements, within the presidency are trying to sabotage, their efforts and the victory of the party in the elections. We also have the governor of Kaduna State talk about that. You've had several, of members of the ruling party. So it is no longer, like you are saying, it is no longer an issue of the ruling party, so to speak, because when you look at it, there is also a conspiracy theory that is saying that perhaps some certain elements are interested in having an interim government. That is to foil, all the efforts that have been geared up to have elections in February and March. For whatever reasons, maybe during that time there will be an interim government. And you have heard this exacerbated by the governor of Rivers State, Governor Nyesom Wike, when he said that recently. So a lot of people believe that theory. A lot of people believe that some of the untold hardship and all that's going on in the country at the moment is because of some of these theories and how they intend to implement them. So I'd like to get your view right now. I'm sure you've heard a wind, of the conspiracy theories. How does these conspiracy theories affect these election processes? Do you see it as a possibility, like some people are postulating, as a means to maybe tamper with the elections in February?
So one of the things that some of us understand about narratives like this that has been spun out on especially right now, what you call conspiracy theories, is what some of us will say that is an absence of elite consensus, where you're not having the elite of the society coming together and say, this is what we want. Rather, what we see, and some of us comment, is what you see the ethnic groups, the Pandef, the Ohanese, the Afenifere, the Middle Belt Forum, people coming to say, based on the interest and overarching interest for the country, this is the direction we think Nigerians should go. Okay? But when you come to those conspiracy theories, almost all the block, like all those people you called, they are all people who tend to defend their particular interests, especially those of them who are called politicians. And it takes our eyes away from what we call the office of the citizens, where the citizen literally in Nigeria is like a person who has no right. There is no meaning, there's no interpretation, there's no benefit to what it means to be called a citizen of this country. Other than that, people will just go and cast their vote, civic responsibility. But when it comes back, when you return for good governance, there's nothing about it. So some of us don't want to put our eyes on those kind of focus because it's clear for what it is. If you check some of them who are house members, what bills did they move? Or distinguished members? If you check some of them who are governors, some of them try to do one or two things, but you still see that there is no overarching interest in the country. So rather, some of the people who will commend for what you just said are Pan-African groups, indigenous groups, people who are very objective in how they feel that the country should be governed. And one thing that I like to say, the face of politicking in Nigeria is beginning to change. It's actually evolving. And I can tell you, going forward from this election, okay, especially in the next coming election, even governorship aspirants are going to be keenly contested for. House of Rep, look at what is happening in the National Assembly. I heard, is it over 50% of them? Is it 50%?
Not return.
Okay, I'm not returning. Do you know what that means for a system? That is a real overhaul. There's a kind of consciousness that is already building up. So for me, the consciousness that is building up is what I'm looking at, and it's what some of us are beginning to see. Post this election, the kind of narratives, the kind of consciousness, the kind of Nigeria that is beginning to evolve.
All right, thank you for that. You spoke about elite consensus.
Yes, please.
And, I was wondering, a lot of people say this is democracy. The voice of the majority, most especially the masses, must prevail. And you know that there is always a divide between the elite and the masses. So when you say elite consensus, is it not a good thing in the real sense of it, that the elites are not even able to agree on one path, on one direction to go for this election? But I'll take your answer to that. We need to take a quick break now.
All
right, let's go on this quick break. When we return, the conversation will continue with my guest right here in the studios. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. This is Politics Alive. We're looking at healing after 2023 elections and the entire process, that has bruised a lot of Nigerians. And we are looking at the effect and how this is going to play out during the elections and after. And of course, I'm still in the studios with public policy analyst Tochukwu Ifemini right here in the studios. All right, you are going to talk to me about elite consensus and the appeal, the desire, the wish of the masses.
I would rather say elite consensus versus the expectation of the masses. And let me bring it together. You were asking before the break, is it not almost like, is it good that they're not involved? Every time a society moved forward, it was because a group of elite came together and said, you know what, we need to chart the interests or the cause or the narrative or the aspirations of our people. And that was what we saw all across Africa from 1956-57 down to 1960, where Kwame Nkrumah gathered Pan-Africanists for the liberation of their country. You come to Nigeria, you saw how we have what some people say they are founding fathers, but they are not the freedom fighters who came, but they were elite, okay? The season of coup came, and it was elite army officers who took us. By the time 1999, before we entered 1999, after General Abacha died, it was the elites again who brought themselves, because they're from different fields, okay? And say, you know what, we need to salvage our society. It's just like you come from a traditional, a clan, a nuclear family. It's the elites of that place. And what, by the way, are those elites? Anybody that has us risen to the zenith of whatever is doing, it must not necessarily be wealthy, maybe more social influence, more power, more social appeal, something like that. And they came together by 1999, and that was what gave back to the People's Democratic Party. Okay, most of the people who were in Nadeco eventually became people that formed the AD. Okay, and that was those were elites already taking positions going to an election. Okay, elite consensus also played even during the time of the 1993 Hope campaign of MKO Abiola. But if you notice, from 1999 going all these years, the elite consensus, because they are of the lack of insincerity, because some of them went into politics, but they are no more giving what the people expect. It now look like, okay, there's nothing we should look up to. Then the expectations or the aspiration of the masses were thwarted. The masses who were supposed to be shouting and saying, thank you for giving us this, and now the masses now begin to revolt. Right now, I'm seeing series of pockets of revolt. There's literally no day now in the last 2 weeks in Nigeria, including today, where people are beginning to revolt one thing or the other based on what is happening. And because most of these masses are not well educated, they are not enlightened to their democratic rights and privileges, it looks like they don't even have a voice. And also because they are not organized. So when you saw the masses in the context of the NSAS trying to come together to mobilize themselves towards what they want to end police brutality, we saw how it was interpreted. We saw that a lot of elites didn't come together to even defend them. But look at something that happened about elite consensus at the point during the days when President Jonathan wanted to increase the fuel price, when we had the Save Nigerian Group. That was an elite consensus based on the dividends of democracy or the expectations of what the people should have. Right now, I can tell you quarter of what has happened in the last 3 years was not up to what provoked that kind of outrage in Save Nigerian Group. So we are having a group of elites that is looking like they can't even come together. That was why in the last 4 years of this administration, the political opposition towards this governance was very weak. I expect that even as People's Democratic Party are battling hard to go into election right now to get their candidate, they should be still hitting hard, especially on what is happening in the economy.
But isn't that an indication of growth, of understanding the system, especially the democratic system, knowing fully well that before 1999, we had never had a long stretch at practicing democracy? Isn't it just a reflection of the fact that, okay, so people are now getting to understand the intrigues of democracy and partisanship and all of that, and know that, well, maybe no party is actually good, so to speak, in their own way. I'm sure if time permits, we'll come to that and look at what the law says about it and all of that. But I'm thinking, isn't it a clear reflection of the fact that the Nigerian people are better understanding democracy, are better understanding partisan politics right now?
Yeah, I can't say it's the growth. If you say understanding of what they should have received over these years, I'll say yes. But if it's growth, no. And can I tell you something about this growth? What happened in Shagari's time by 1980? and the coup that happened. That was a democratic experiment that wanted to happen, and a coup happened because it was said that the politicians of that era were corrupt. And the coup started, okay, from President Buhari, who did that coup, to the president IBB, to Abacha. We came to 1999. We had high expectation. We thought that this new, yes, and the new Republic actually took off with a lot of reforms, a lot of expectation. If there was a continuous build-up, I can tell you that by now the people know what democracy means. But right now, can I tell you something? The current way in which we have practiced democracy, it has not given Nigeria the status. Do you know how much we're in debt? Do you know how many people we can't have healthcare systems to ourselves? If our elites cannot even use the healthcare system on ground, and because they are elite, especially those ones exposed politically, we go abroad for their health. Their children cannot school in our schools. They cannot drink the kind of water we drink. They use jeeps, and these are up to basic things.
Okay, sorry that I have to cut you. Let's quickly talk about important issues, especially with the election and post-election. You would remember that from last year, from 2022, Nigerians became excited. I think the 2022 year welcomed us around this time last year with the passage of the Electoral Act. Everybody became excited. Everybody became encouraged. You know that for once, democracy will prevail, since there are laws that will guide, the process. And a lot of laws, a lot of things were put into that document. And I quickly like you to reflect on a bit of them, which is Section 92, for example, talks about how candidates in political parties should behave, especially when it comes to talking to themselves, using certain languages, and all of that. Would you say that the players across the political parties have adhered strictly to this rule, in this campaigning season that is about to round off? That's one. I want you to, answer both in one breath. Now, if your answer is yes, then there may be no need. But if your answer is no, then it means that it has left a mental lacuna, for the Nigerian people. A lot of people will have that to grapple with. A lot of people have picked new enemies. I said that earlier. A lot of people have built new friendships, but some of these friendships may necessarily not be healthy, for the country, because it's a build-up of some power, and it perhaps may not be in good stead, especially for the advantage of the country. So tell us, how will this affect Nigeria after elections?
Okay, so Mr. Benga, I think my answer is no and yes. Some political players have been quite fair. The presidential candidates of some parties have been quite fair in their speech. Some have not been fair in their speech. Their media handlers have not been fair in their speech. It's almost like a war. And like you said, there have been tensions, there have been killings, there have been agitations. And I can say something is normal. I don't even expect anything less. The reason is this: it has always been our trend, and because there are no consequences, it will happen. But I'll say something. The post implication of this kind of abuses, threats, are things people do not forget. I remember in the last election, somebody said that if this election is not won like this, the country will be battered and dogs and baboons will be soaked in blood. It's a statement that up to now, Nigeria will forever remember. And we now knew what happened after that election. Okay? Thank God we didn't have the country soaked in blood, but we now knew that that was the beginning of another kind of crime we had never witnessed before in this country. The statement, and there's a story behind that, by the way. We've heard the story of how people were brought and everything. Nobody has come to refute it, but well-meaning Nigerians have come to bring out their own narrative. It may be alleged, but it is what it is. All right? Now, the post-implication of this kind of statements is that it further widens the gap, the bridge of how a particular politician will view another one. They will even tell you that all of this is just politics. It doesn't mean anything on the rest. But some of us are very careful to chronicle these words. I envisage a time in Nigeria where people are going to be very, very careful, because that's the reason why the peace committee tries to come to bridge them together. Somehow, with their interventions, I feel it's even a bit curtailed, because they know that there should be limits. They are also aware about the electoral injunction on that, but they know that even if you violate it, INEC is not going to slam them. And that's one of the things we are calling on INEC as a regulator in this situation. Look at the kind of comment the Rec of Lagos just said some days ago. I mean, as far as INEC is a regulator, unbiased, we call them to bring out and make statements. It's just like what happened just some few hours ago, is it today, when a tweet somebody just tweeted, a click from the INEC on the comment that was made on the candidate of Labour Party. And right now, INEC is looking who is the person who did it and the rest. If that can happen from within INEC, and you know the implication of that, why should a regulator have somebody, doing that? You should now understand what should happen post-election. So some of us, post-election is what we're concerned about. If this particular candidate win, this may be the reactions of Nigeria. If this particular win, or the ACN, or the LP, or this is what Nigeria will. The current economic situation in the country, we've still not dealt with it. By the time we finish at the end of this month, nobody knows, is the Naira going to be...
I really do wish that we had more time to talk about this. Our time is running out. But I want you to answer this finally before we go. What is your best suggestion to unify Nigeria after the elections? Hoping and praying that it holds on the 25th of February and 11th of March as scheduled.
Like I said the last time I was here, I said I will not be surprised if it's postponed, but we also believe that it may not be postponed. This is the longest period political players have been given to play. My own advice for Nigeria, and what I'll call the office of all citizens of Nigeria to do post this election, and anybody that's going to take over power, is to concentrate first to unify the nation. And that's why you see the candidate of the PDP keeps on saying he's the unifier. Nigeria is deeply divided. This level of suspicion based on bigotry, religious intolerance, ethnic intolerance, all that has never ever been witnessed. Such that we count this particular election with religions and zones. We've heard people post on religious sites say things they're not supposed to say. If I'm the person that will take over power post 2023 election, one of the things I will promulgate, or the House of Rep members, is that henceforth, hate speech from religious body, hate speech from people who want to further our divides, including even some of these social cultural organizations, will be dealt with. Because this is the beginning of the slope of a system, of a country or a nation who is trying to forge themselves into unity going out. And that's why like we have seen in Rwanda, it is not a matter whether a Hutu or Tutsi, you may end up in a prison for even asking that question, because they've tested what that thing has done to them. Nigerians need to be united, and the first thing that we need to do, or anybody needs to come, both from the office of the citizens, which is all of us, those of you in the media, some of us with our initiative and our interventions that we do daily, and we call on the politicians. The issue of making Nigeria one is a business we must do, and making the nation what it's supposed to be. Nigeria is at a crossroad that it has never ever, not even 1993 when we saw how it was coming, or 1999. This particular crossroad is the most different of all, and we call people to live the ethos of our national pledge. When you look at the ethos of our national pledge, you say to defend our unity and uphold our honor and glory. I will say, so help me God. So I think it will take God to help us.
All right, that's a good way to end the conversation. Thank you so much for being on the program today. All right, I have been speaking with Tochukwu Ifemene, public policy analyst and political analyst, on the show, and it's been a wonderful conversation. No doubt, I'm leaving you with some of his words, maybe paraphrased, that the responsibility to unite Nigeria, to heal Nigeria, is the duty of each and every one of us, you and me inclusive. That is, when elections are come and gone, it is our responsibility to remember that, first of all, there is a nation to defend, and that together we can do it. We can achieve it. And of course, I believe that we will achieve it and get better as Nigerians. And Nigeria will never be destroyed. We will stay together forever. Thank you so much for joining us on today's edition of the program. I'll get to see you again some other time. It's been a wonderful time. Have a great evening. I'm Olubinga George.